I was thinking that maybe I should start my own true crime podcast where I just basically tell the plots of these movies as true crime stories. You think that would be popular? You think that'd be marketable? You think somebody hasn't done that already? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you a good overview of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus, which, in short, is that we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. Now, this, however, is our doctorate series. This is where we revisit a subgenre that we've already done a video about, and we kind of recap that video, revisit it, and then we look at a new doctorate level selection, a 4th movie to add to the subgenre that is maybe a little bit more niche, maybe it's newer, maybe it's just something that's a little bit more appealing to me, a little deeper cut, something new to add to the conversation. And the conversation we're having today is about true crime horror movies. And in our previous video, we talked a lot about the true crime horror movie. This is the true crime genre in and of itself, and how it's so extremely popular these days, how the appeal is very widespread. In just the last few decades, it's really blown up into something really huge. And the horror movie versions of a lot of these true crime stories are, as a subset of that, are also incredibly popular. And I think the appeal of that has to do with the reality of the situation. The fact that these are real crimes that happen make it a little bit more unsettling than like your supernatural horror movies or things like that are fiction, right? I think that adds to the appeal of these true crime horror movies. But I also think that's what makes it a little controversial. And we talked about this on the previous video, that it can be a little gauche, if you want to say it like that, to find entertainment in actual real life suffering and misery of real life people, victims, real life victims of killers or whatnot in true crime stories. It's a little bit weird. And I think a lot of people maybe would wrestle with that a little bit, but obviously not that much because, like I said, the industry is booming. It's a really huge genre on its own, in its own thing. And then the horror versions of these movies, the subgenre of true crime horror movies, is one that is rich and ripe and just doesn't seem like it has any intention of slowing down. And we were able to look at a couple of really, really great examples of these kinds of movies in our previous video. And I'm going to go ahead and do a recap of that video and those movies right now. The first true crime horror movie we looked at in our previous video was Zodiac. And we talked a lot about Zodiac being directed by David Fincher and how he's got this amazing eye. He's just such a great visual director, and his shots and the mood he would set in this movie were so powerful and added so much to this movie. But also just the details of the period, because it's a period piece set in the 70s, and the details regarding the specifics of the crimes and how he worked those into the story added so much flavor and so much texture to this true crime horror movie. And it helped that it had a bevy of A-list actors in there, Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo and Gyllenhaal, that are just doing great work here. It's so good that you really forget that they're stars and start to really believe that they're the characters that they are, which was essential to really immersing you in the story, which again is a true story. And the way that they did the suspense, and which is a movie essentially about an investigation, right? It's about a bunch of people looking into a movie and investigating who is the Zodiac killer, but they managed to add these suspenseful scenes. We talked a lot about the basement scene, the infamous basement scene, and how to add tension to this movie and make it feel pulse-inducing when it really is just a story about guys trying to solve some riddles, and the way they found a way to wrap up the movie, even though the case remains unsolved. Just a masterpiece from David Fincher, a really excellent example of true crime horror movies, and a must-see, frankly. And the next true crime horror movie we looked at was Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. And we talked a lot about how notorious this movie is, how like it's got this cult following because of how heavy and rough it is, in part due to the way it's filmed. It looks so gritty and kind of low grade, and that grittiness gives a realism to what the footage that you're really kind of buying into, like this like almost found footagey style to it. It really kind of puts you in the grimy, disgusting mind of Henry Lee Lucas, the real life serial killer that is based on, in his partner Otis Toole. And it really doesn't shy away from the brutality of the things that they were doing and the grotesque stuff that they would get off on doing, basically. In fact, the movie pulls its punches a little bit. It doesn't really show just how awful and gruesome things were, but it doesn't shy away from how uncomfortable these things are. It forces you to look at these disturbing things, even though it's, like I said, it's softening some of the facts and it's kind of playing loose and fast with them. But Michael Rooker in the lead role is what really makes this worth watching. I talked a lot at length about Michael Rooker. I even shared a fun anecdote about meeting him that if you want to hear, go watch the original video. But he's a great guy and he gives an incredible performance here that was really a taxing one for him. But it sells this movie and it's what gets under your skin so much. So yeah, another must see if you can handle it. And the last movie we talked about, the last true crime horror movie we talked about, was The Girl Next Door. And we talked about how it's such a dark and uncomfortable, hardcore, dark subject matter. The abuse that these kids, and this one girl in particular, was put through is really, really rough stuff. And how, even though this movie is really just inspired by the true events and really more of a film, just like going through the similar plot lines, and then we talked about how there's another movie in American Crime that is a little bit more realistic and focuses more on the court case of that same exact real life story. We talked about how ultimately the stuff that's shown on screen, which is wildly uncomfortable, really intense, really brutal stuff, still pales in comparison to what was actually done in real life to these child victims. The sexual assault, the physical abuse, the mental abuse, all of it just horrific. It's so bad that it's kind of unbelievable that it's a real story. When you watch the movie, it's hard to believe that this stuff really, really happened. We talked about that and how it's so shockingly, it's almost over the top, and yet the stuff that seems like the most ridiculous and maybe made up in the movie is the stuff that actually happened, that they're taking straight from real life fact. It's shocking. The real life story, the real life crime is incredibly shocking and incredibly depressing. This is not one that's for the faint of heart. Honestly, it's a rough watch, but it's a kind of an important one. We talked about that in the previous video. How this is an important one. This story is important to not be forgotten, and it should be told. So those were our picks for the true crime horror movies subgenre, and now I'm going to give you a fourth doctorate level selection. Our doctorate level selection for the true crime horror subgenre is The Town That Dreaded Sundown. The Town That Dreaded Sundown came out in 1976, and it was directed by Charles B. Pierce, who is probably better known or best known for directing Legend of Boggy Creek, which we have talked about on the channel not too long ago. And he's, so he kind of has some bona fide horror cred here. And the movie is one that, I'll be honest with you, I thought that I may have put this on the syllabus already, and I think what happened was I had intended to, and then I couldn't find room for it, and so it kind of just fell off as a result. But I now had an opportunity to get it back on here through the Doctorate series, so here we are, because I really want to talk about this one, because I actually enjoy this one quite a bit. Now, if you haven't seen it before, the movie follows the events of a true life crime in 1946 called the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, where a masked man would come upon couples who were parked in Lover's Lane and kill them. He would shoot them or he'd attack them. Sometimes they didn't die. And the investigation into trying to solve who this is, which, by the way, was never solved in real life, and the hijinks that abound as the town tries to brace itself for this rash of violence happening. And I'm going to go ahead and stop there and not spoil the movie too much, even though the case is almost 100 years old at this point. It's like 80 years old at this point. But it is an interesting case. And it's an interesting movie because the movie is kind of presenting itself almost in like a newsreel fashion. Like it's got this narrator that comes out and talks like in their voice like this, tell you the story. Here's the events that happened. And it's kind of an interesting choice. It feels very true crime documentary style in a way, like an old fashioned style way of doing it. And it's pretty effective. And it's a good way to give you a download of the information right away and introduce characters right away. It's a little bit cheesy, but it works for the movie for me. And it really adds to this kind of realism that this movie's going for, which I think it does a pretty good job of. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this movie for me is that I always felt like it played like loose and fast with the case, but it really doesn't. When I started digging into the research on this, it actually does a pretty good job of accurately depicting the events as they happened. I don't think it's quite as detailed as like Zodiac, but it is a really good telling of the story while compressing things for cinematic reasons and changing some of the facts, names and stuff like that, so that it's not, so it doesn't, use anybody's real name, victim names or anything like that. And they kind of soften some of the more grislier details of the assaults, the attacks and stuff like that. But it's still giving a really good, truthful or mostly truthful depiction of these actual Moonlight murders, as they were called, and the sensationalism around them, the panic in the town and the kind of grandstanding cops and stuff like that, and the issues with the investigation. It's really nailing a lot of this down pretty well. Now, one of the reasons why this movie tends to be a little iconic amongst horror fans is the design of the masked killer. The masked killer, which is a guy with kind of a sack over his head with eye holes cut out of it, is pretty creepy, actually. He's decently scary in the movie. I think he's pretty intimidating. His look is pretty good. It's so much so that, and this is why it's kind of famous, it's clearly been ripped off in Friday the 13th Part 2 for the look of young Jason. He looks he's wearing the same mask as the guy in Town That Dreaded Sundown. It's very clear. You can call it homage all you want. It's a ripoff, guys. And that's not a bad thing to rip off because, like I said, it's a pretty cool, intimidating looking mask. I like it quite a bit. It's so simple, yet really creepy. You saw this guy walk up to your car. Pretty upsetting, right? So I think it made sense to crib it for Jason before they came up with the hockey mask idea. It works. The killer and the kills in this, I think, are very effective. They're not super imaginative, because this is not exactly a slasher movie. It's a true crime horror movie, right? So they're trying to be somewhat accurate to the actual crimes. Now they do some things that are a little bit fun. I won't spoil them, of course, but some things that are a little bit fun in terms of kills. But for the most part, I don't think they're super imaginative, but they do feel brutal. And I think the reason they do is because they're based on real people who were really killed in this fashion. I think that adds something to it. Again, the knowing that it's real, that realism aspect to it, makes it feel a little bit more like intense or something like that. And I think that's very true in this movie, and it's very effective. Now, I will admit that the movie is not without its flaws. There is, and this is a thing you see critics talk about a lot in this movie, is there's some really clunky comic relief. There's like some buffoonery, specifically with the cops. They're kind of played for laughs. There's some goofy stuff like the guy who forgets his keys. He's got to go up and get his keys. It's like a really long scene, and everybody's kind of like giving him the side eye, and it's accompanied by this really goofy music that's just like underscoring like how silly this all is, and it feels wildly out of place in this movie. And it reminds me very much of the original Last House on the Left, the Wes Craven movie, Last House on the Left, which does the same thing. It has these bumbling cops, and it has this silly music, slapsticky music, and they get into silly things, and they're just bumbling and idiots, and it's supposed to be funny in this really dark, upsetting movie. Now, The Town That Dreaded Sundown is not nearly as dark as Last House on the Left, but it's the same thing. It's a very serious vibe, and it's playing it very straight, and then it adds this really ham-fisted comedy in there that really kind of doesn't derail the movie. I still think the movie is very, very good, but it really is glaringly disruptive to the film, and it's unfortunate because it'd be so easy to just trim this stuff out, just trim it out entirely. The ending of this movie is also admittedly a little bit flimsy, but I kind of get it. This is an unsolved case, and so they had to come up with some way to kind of find a resolution to it that felt kind of earned, and it's fine. It's fine. It's not great. It feels like it ends on a little bit of a limp note, considering how good the movie is up until that point. So I admittedly maybe nitpicking a little bit on that ending, but it is something that's worth noting. It's not a perfect film. And critics would agree with me, because when this movie came out, critics maligned this movie. It was not beloved, but it was a box office hit. People did go see this. And I think that as time has gone on, the critical reputation of this movie has been rehabilitated a little bit over time. People have more of an appreciation for it now than they did at the time that it came out. I think people are a little less disturbed by the subject matter now as they were then. And so now it's got this cult following. It's got some love. Enough so that they actually did a sequel to this movie that's kind of a meta sequel to it, that is a movie where this movie 1976 movie it exists in the world of the sequel, and kind of like Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows. Honestly, I really enjoyed the sequel. I'm not going to get into too much because we are going to talk about it in another video in the future, so stay tuned for that. But this one, the OG, definitely needed to be talked about. Like I said, I really thought I had gotten this onto the syllabus already, and I hadn't. I was surprised that I hadn't, and I'm rectifying that now. If this is one that you haven't yet to see, I'd say definitely check it out. Again, I don't want to oversell and say it's one of the most amazing movies of all time, but it's really good. I really, really like it. I think the kills are fun. I think the killer's really cool. Like I said, I've noted the problems on it, but overall, for a true crime horror movie, it's doing a really good job of giving a really interesting and also still kind of fun depiction of what really happened in the 1940s in Texarkana. So definitely, if you're a true crime junkie, check this one out for sure. I don't think you'll be disappointed. So that's our doctorate pick for the true crime horror subgenre. But of course, I've got an extra credit selection for you because this is another one that I really wanted to talk about and hadn't been able to find a spot for, and actually held on to it for this video. The extra credit movie I want to talk about is Borderland. Borderland came out in 2007 and it was written and directed by Zev Berman. And when I looked Zev up, they don't have a whole lot of credits to their name. Like there's basically like three movies, and the only one I knew was this movie. And the reason I knew it is because it's part of the After Dark Horror Fest, which I've talked about multiple times on the channel. I even did a whole video on After Dark Horror Fest movies, and I was going to put this movie in that video, but then I decided to hold on to it and talk about it here because I thought that the true crime aspect of it was a really interesting thing to bring up. So, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about three American friends that go across the border into Mexico to have a good time, hookers and alcohol and partying, basically. One of them gets separated and winds up getting kidnapped by a narco-satanist. And it's a problem because this person plans to sacrifice this young man in an effort to appease his gods and will give him the power of invisibility while he smuggles his drugs across the border, and hijinks abound, and they're pretty brutal hijinks. I'm going to go ahead and stop there to not spoil the movie for you. But this movie is based on a lesser known true crime story. This is a story that takes place just across the border, and it is involving a drug lord named Adolfo de Jesus Costanzo. I think I'm pronouncing the name right, and a victim from University of Texas named Mark J. Kilroy. And I hope I'm getting the names right. And they, here's the thing. So the drug lord is practicing this religion called Palomayombe, right? And he's basically a narco-satanist, basically drug lord cult leader, right? And this is real life, right? And he really did believe he was like, I think he was Cuban or something like that, and he had brought in this African religion, if you will, to Mexico, and he was using it to protect his drug mules and his people, his cartel, from the authorities. And they basically thought human sacrifice would appease the gods and make them invisible, and they would not be able to get caught by authorities. This is real. This is what he believed. And he wound up kidnapping this American tourist because he basically thought having an American tourist, like having an American rather than the Mexicans that he'd been killing, would have like more power. It would give more protection. This American tourist was like the nephew of like a U.S. Customs agent or something like that, and that's what sparked a big interest in America in terms of what happened to this guy and finding him, which put a lot of pressure on the Mexican government to actually crack down on this when they've been kind of turning a blind eye, and they found many bodies, and the whole thing got blown out. This guy Adolfo was he actually died. He had somebody shoot him. Then his people got arrested. Anyways, the movie is taking that, and not unlike The Girl Next Door, using that to fuel a fiction story that's very similar in plot. So there are obviously differences, the names and differences of some of the details, not the least of which is that the three guys that go over across the border to party are kind of jerks. They're not very likable, and there's nothing to say that Mark Kilroy was unlikable. As far as I can tell, perfectly likable guy. There's nothing about him going there for debauched reasons or anything like that. So they add that to the movie, and right off the bat, it gave me kind of Hostel vibes, like Hostel from 2005, which comes out just a couple years before this movie, and the kind of the American jerks that go to Europe and get kidnapped and tortured and stuff like that. Because this movie is kind of in the torture porn era, right? And it's kind of doing a little bit of torture porny stuff. There is some really grisly violence happening here when the guy is getting tortured and stuff. and some other people getting harmed as well. And it's pretty graphic and pretty gruesome and pretty brutal, in part because, again, it's based on true stories. Like, it's not exactly true, but it is based on true stuff. In fact, they dialed down a little bit of what was actually being done, especially in terms of like sexual assault and things like that. They don't put that in the movie. That's what happened in real life. So once again, you're kind of making it even softer in the movie because the real life stuff is so horrific. And they really nailed the religious aspects of it. Like the whole ritualistic aspects of this, they really got that pretty accurate. The way that, they're taking the brains of the people and the bones and stuff like that, they really did do this stuff in real life, and they showed in the movie fairly accurately. They also show how the cartel's influence over this area, this town, this border town, is really brutal and really fear inducing. And the way that the people in the town, the locals and the police, are afraid to do anything to challenge these people because they seem like they're invincible. They do a really good job, by the way, of using this location. And the way they've shot everything is really washed out and kind of like overexposed almost and stuff like that. And it gives the footage this kind of gritty realism, not unlike Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. It feels more real because it's not super clean and slick. It really evokes like the heat and the kind of the visceralness of this town, and like how like empty and depressed it is. It comes through visually. It's a really nice job by Zev in terms of directing this. It looks really, really good. And he's got capable actors here. Like I said, the main actors, they're all kind of jerks. They're meant to be. They're playing up that way. You got Ryder Strong in there. He's the guy that gets kidnapped. And it's like, I'm not a huge Ryder Strong fan of the guy, but he's very believable in the role. Sean Astin shows up in this role as one of the followers in this cult. And he is wonderfully intimidating in this movie. Surprising, out of character, kind of against character role for him to pick. Really, really good in this. Really unsettling. Really kind of wild to see him in this role. But the movie's doing a really good job of balancing the tension and the gore and the story. They're really delivering all of this. And again, they've made it kind of Hollywood. Hollywood's not the right word because it's an indie film, but they've really movieized it. They've made characters that are looking for him and going, the victim, and trying to help him, which wasn't a thing that was really happening in real life. And they give this movie an ending that is different than the ending in real life and is a little bit more satisfying, I think, a little bit more revenge seeky. It's a little bit more of an uplifting ending, I think, than the real life ending, which, you can understand why they would do that. Now, this movie does get well received by critics. There's not a lot of reviews, but the reviews are all positive, and there's not a whole lot of buzz about this movie. I don't hear people talk about this one as much. And again, I think it might be because the original, the actual true crime story doesn't get talked about that much. It's a pretty brutal thing, man. It's got, all kinds of ritualistic, like culty type stuff in it. It's got drug lord stuff. I don't know if it's just because it's like Mexico that, it doesn't really get the same kind of shine, but the American tourist getting, kidnapped and ultimately killed, it should add some flavor to that. It did in real life. People didn't care until an American got snatched up and killed. That's when things started happening. 15 Mexicans got killed. Nobody cared. But I don't know if that really means why or translates into why the true crime story doesn't seem like it gets talked about as much as some of these other ones I hear a lot about. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I haven't seen the Netflix special on this one, the docuseries on it. Let me know if I've missed that. But the movie is definitely worth checking out. Again, if you like true crime stuff, this one's more of a movie than some of the other stuff we've talked about, but it's still really going to scratch that itch. And when you know that it's based on a true story, it's pretty fascinating, and it'll make you really want to go and research the true crime story, which again, very fascinating stuff. Should make for a really good true crime podcast on its own. So definitely underseen movie that I want to shine a light on. So check it out, and of course, let me know what you think of it. So that's going to do it for our doctorate level selections for the true crime horror subgenre. I really do like both of these movies quite a bit. It's why I wanted to talk about them. I wanted to shine a light on them. I wanted to get them out there and encourage you to check them out and let me know what you think, because I feel like they are both a little underseen, but especially Borderland. But yeah, let me know what you think of those ones, and I'm going to let you know what I think of this Horror Trivia Pursuit card. It's that time where I'm going to go ahead and answer a question live on camera, hopefully not embarrass myself. And since we're talking about true crime, I'm going to go with the killer category, because both these movies deal with killers, okay? So here's our question. What Christian ceremony is Karen attending on the day she is murdered in 1976's Alice, Sweet Alice? I am pretty sure that I know the answer to this question, but I think I've got an Sweet Alice question before, and I'm pretty sure I got it wrong. So I think I might not have seen. I thought I got confused. Long story, doesn't matter. I'm getting off track. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question. It's kind of funny because they're talking about a Christian ritual here, when we were talking about like cult rituals for Borderlands. So a little bit on theme for that one there. But Christian ritual, it's interesting that they use that because that phrase is giving me second thoughts. I'm pretty sure I know what they're talking about, and it just in my mind I wouldn't refer to it as a ritual exactly, but I guess technically, yeah, it would be a ritual. I don't know what else you would call it. That is an accurate term. It's just it's not the way my mind thinks of it, and might not be the way your mind thinks of it too. So maybe this is a helpful hint. I don't know. By the way, we did talk about Alice Sweet Alice on the channel. It is an excellent film. I don't need to go and rehash it right now, but if you haven't seen it, I would say check it out for sure. But yeah, this one, I can't even say if you haven't seen the movie, you're obviously taking a shot in the dark, and I don't know that it's an easy shot to take, to be honest with you. I think this is pretty hard if you haven't seen the movie. Might even be a little bit hard if you've seen the movie, especially if you don't remember it super well. You could get it wrong. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to get it right, but I feel like 85-90% is where I'm at on that. So go ahead and lock in your answer. I've locked in my answer now. I'm not going to overthink it this time. So locked in. Good. Okay. So my answer is, I think it's First Communion. I think she's doing First Communion because she's in the dress and everything like that. I'm almost positive it's First Communion. I'm going to First Communion. The card says her First Communion. So yeah, I was right on that one. But yeah, calling First Communion a ritual, it is what it is. But you know, having grown up Catholic, not a Catholic anymore, but having grown up Catholic, I don't think of First Communion as a ritual. It's just kind of something that's done, like a quinceañera almost or something, you know. So it was kind of a weird twist for me. Did that throw you off as well, or did you get that one right? And did you guess it right? Because I'd be really interested if you guess it right, didn't know the answer, and you just guessed. I'll be pretty impressed with that one. I'll also be impressed if you have some funny bad answers that were wrong. So let me know if you got those in there too. But that's going to do it for the video. Thank you very much for hanging out to the end. I appreciate you guys. Let me know if there's any other cool true crime horror movies I haven't checked out yet. If there's something I haven't seen, I'll probably add it to a list and check it out. And then maybe I'll let you know what I think about it in another video. But until we get to that video, we're going to wrap this video up by just saying, class dismissed.